Hi, everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the support tier list for patch 13.8. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. We're streaming probably about 4 or 5 nights a week these days. While the school semester is winding down, it's just really hard on Mondays and Wednesdays. And then lately, we've been hanging out with family and friends a little bit more on Saturday. So I'm on most days, but there are a few that I'm missing. But come by, check it out. I'm going to try to start around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time most days when I stream. So yeah. All right, let's go ahead and get in here. So I've got the patch notes up. I'm just going to go over them really quick. I don't think a lot of it's going to change the meta, so I just didn't think it'd be worth doing a separate video that would only be like 5 minutes long. So I'm just going to go through those really quickly, and then I'll get right into the support tier list. Here's the preview of it. This thing is blanking out the new guy or whatever, Melio. And so that's kind of the preview of where we're going. Let's talk about the patch notes, then we'll get in here and talk about what matters. Okay, champion. So Aurelion Sol getting a little hit to armor and health. Probably not going to matter except for at the highest levels of play. Ezreal 2 AD. This will help like high level play, but even in solo queue, I think Ezreal is maybe a little underrated. He can be okay in certain comps with that Essence Reaver Rush build. He does quite a bit of damage if he's able to skip the tier and then go Essence Reaver, and I don't know what else he gets after that. Probably like Shield Bow or something maybe. But that build in particular is kind of strong. And keep in mind that the 2 AD doesn't seem like a lot, but because of the nature of the scaling on his Q and how that sort of works multiplicative with Sheen, then this actually could be a little bit more than it seems in the early game. So I don't think it's immediately going to make him like OP, but the 2 AD can be a little deceptive on champions that get Sheen and champions that have a lot of AD modifiers, which is what Ezreal has. So I think he's a little underrated. I would maybe put him B tier. It's possible C tier. I mean, there's always so many bad Ezreals, but I think if he's played at a decent level, this could actually be all right. And I think he was already seeing some pro play beforehand. Okay, Garen, base attack damage, base armor. Again, this seems like it's not that big of a deal, but because of the nature of the AD scaling on Garen, especially his spin to win, I think that's actually pretty significant. And the base armor is pretty good top lane with 80 matchup. So it seems like he should be okay. Maybe he really is underperforming, but this should help him out. I don't think it'll affect pro, but at lower elos especially, this could be pretty impactful. Janna, okay, these are actually some pretty good buffs. I don't think it's enough to really move the needle on her in solo queue. But she is getting 10 more damage on her W, so she can kind of harass a little bit. And this Eye of the Storm is actually pretty significant that the shield doesn't decay until 2.5 seconds. Now, they've already nerfed her shield into Oblivion at like a 1 point, or like a 160 or 170 shield when it used to be 240. But she does still have that scaling on her E, which I think they've kept intact in terms of giving the extra 20% plus healing and shielding. So it's okay. I don't think it's enough to bring her back in the meta. I think they just need to decide what they want her to be. If they want to give her this early game power, then they need to just commit to it more fully, and they might have to nerf some of her late game. I think it'd be more interesting to just double down on her peeling potential, so maybe make the slow a little bit bigger on this, lower the cooldown on the Q, or maybe if she hits an enemy champion with the Q, then it refunds half the cooldown, or maybe it slows somebody for 2 seconds after they hit them with a Q, or maybe knocks them up for a little bit longer. I just think she needs a little bit more CC and maybe lower the cooldown on her R to at least 130 instead of 150 seconds. Just a couple of little things like that, and just take the AD off of her E. They might already have taken the AD off of the E. I think they did, right? And that was kind of the nail in the coffin why we just never see her anymore. But they needed to take that off of the E a long time ago. No, they still have it. They just nerfed the amount a lot. It used to be like 50 base, I think. Yeah, right here. Okay, it was 50 at one point, I think. No, maybe it was 40 and then they had a ratio on it. Either way, they nerfed it pretty significantly. I think they just need to take that off. That's just hidden power that has no skill expression, just a little bit of scaling that favors AD champions. I think this day and age, just take the AD off of there, lower the cooldown. They already did lower it. It used to be 18 seconds. Just make the cooldown something like 10 seconds flat, Increase the shield amount to at least 200 again. And I mean, that is part of her unique identity, where like Karma shields and many of the other shields give like attack speed, that hers gives AD. But I would just rethink her and her unique toolkit as primarily peel. So she needs shorter cooldowns, and she really needs displacements and to be able to sort of push people back. They could think about that with Howling Gale, that it pushes people back, kind of like Melio's Ball if they want to. But the bottom line is, I don't think this is going to matter. She's not a horrible champion, but I would still probably put her around tier 3. Okay. I think she needs more clarity in her identity, and I don't think the early game harassment is it. Okay, Jarvan, a little bit less attack growth, doesn't matter. 10 less AD damage on the Q. This might matter in the early game as far as his clear goes, but I still just think his kit, if the numbers are right, he's just too strong. He gives armor shred on his Q. He gives attack speed on the E. He has a unique form of CC that's uncleansable. They have to have a dash or flash to get out of it. So it hard counters certain immobile champions like Jinx. And he just does quite a bit of burst damage. So, you know, I guess this is kind of moving in the right direction. Maybe this is enough to knock him off a bit. But I just think that his kit is just too dangerous. It's too strong. I think they need to take something off of his kit to find a way to balance him. Maybe, like, take the shred off the Q or at least lower it. I don't know what the answer is, but he's still too strong. And that's almost always the problem with Jarvan, is if his numbers are okay, he just does too much. Okay, Blue Cane nerfed for some reason. It says it's going on in Eastern region, so I'm not sure what's up with that. Maybe there's some people going crazy in Korean solo queue with this, but overall, not going to matter for pro. Probably not going to matter most of the time in solo queue, but they are hitting the Blue Assassin a little bit. They just nerfed Kha'Zix. I said it was kind of ridiculous because Assassins were really underpowered right now, just with how much lifesteal is out there with Shield Bow and Bloodthirster. They did nerf Bloodthirster, but okay, that's fine. I'm not a huge fan of Kha'Zix in general, but I think Assassins in the meta being a thing in order to counteract AD carries so they're not too strong is necessary for the game. Okay, but yeah, I still don't think he's going to be that great. Kog'Maw, they're doubling down on his passive, which is really weird. I think they just need to rework his passive. It's like Season 1 design. Let's just give him a random exploding corpse. Just in case he dies, maybe he can trade a kill back. It like doesn't fit thematically. Or not, maybe thematically in terms of him being void or something. But it just doesn't like fit the genre of ADC. Like, it needs to be something that's active. Like, I don't know, maybe every time he attacks, then he gets a little bit more damage or a little bit more move speed, or just something around him landing successful attacks needs to give him some sort of successive bonus. That's what I think would be a good passive for him. This is just weird, but okay, sure. The Q poke is down a little bit. Probably doesn't matter. Maybe for AP Cog. And the mana cost is down a little bit on the E. The slow is up. That's actually kind of significant. 10% more slow on the E. Could be okay. The mana cost down is pretty nice. That's going to give him a lot more wave clear. So these are probably good for like AP Cog, but I think that's pretty niche. So weird buffs, but okay. Leona, this is pretty nice. I mean, 5 extra resists is okay. And then your magic damage is 10 more in the early game. Maybe. I mean, she still has a lot of really short cooldowns. I think a big thing that has sort of hurt Leona a lot is just the wild prevalence of tenacity. Now, they did nerf that a bit a few patches ago, but it's really that green pet in the jungle that gives tenacity, combined with Mercury Treads, combined with stuff from the runes. You know, people were getting like 50% tenacity or something. Her combo really doesn't work if you have a lot of tenacity, because you're gonna, or if you have mobility. So that's been the big problem with Leona, is so many people just have so much tenacity. And Cleanse also kind of soft counters her. So, anyways, this will probably help out a little bit. I'm not sure how much it's going to move the needle, though. Okay, Lilia, this looks pretty significant. She's going to get a lot more healing in the jungle, and then healing as champions is a little bit stronger. She would get nerfed with the demonic mask, but I think she still, you know, could be pretty strong. Malphite, couple of nerfs there, probably good. I don't think Malphite should really be a thing past like silver or gold. Like the fact that he's getting played in pro play just means his numbers are probably too strong. He's just too consistent. I think that R is just too valuable. Okay. I think that, so in other words, I think the stuff that's played in pro needs to be high skill cap, and that's really where it's at its best. Speaking of which, Nidalee, extra base armor, extra armor growth. I don't think this is going to matter for the vast majority of players, but for pro players or really high challengers that one trick Nidalee, this is probably good. She's an interesting champion, so I like that. Hammer Shock, a little bit more damage. Steadfast Presence is a little bit faster. Okay, I think she needs lower cooldowns, especially on the W. But, alright. Rakan, 2 less base armor and less armor growth. This is not going to matter. Like, the only lanes where this would matter are against, like, maybe double AD, right? If you, like, in pro, if you see, like, Varus support or Ashe support, or in solo queue, like, Senna support. Just where you're facing double AD or like super heavy poke where you're just getting completely pushed in the entire game versus Caitlyn or something. Maybe this matters, but I don't think it's going to matter that much long run. I hope that this makes him less popular because he's the 3rd most popular champ right now for support, which I do not like to see that because if the enemy picks him, I'm in trouble for solo queue. But that's exactly what I've been looking for. Okay, Cosmic Drive is just basically they're changing this into Rise and Cassiopeia. Buy this item, no one else does. So you get ability power and then movement speed, stacking movement speed when you land successive spells. Okay, could be really good on a few specific champions, but I don't know if anyone else is going to get it. You can report people from match history. Okay, so I don't think there's going to be a lot of different... Wasn't there an Alistar? Did I skip Alistar? I think I probably did. Aurelion Soul. Am I crazy? Was there not an Alistar buff? Did that not go through? I thought there was... They previewed, like, Alistar. Okay, I guess it didn't go through. They were saying they were going to give Alistar a buff to, like, 8 seconds on his ult. I didn't think it was going to matter that much, but it looks like they decided to pull it. Okay. Tier list. So I think Rakan still going to be number 1. In my mind, if you're really good, I think he's going to be a highly contested pro pick. But in solo queue, as you can see, he's still really good as well. He's over 53%. This might be his highest win rate of all time. He's obviously a really high skill cap champion. I think only Thresh can really rival him of sort of mainstream supports. There are some other, tough supports out there. But he's just really good. As I always say, the biggest thing about Rakan is he's super safe throughout the game, but particularly in the laning phase. He can almost always get away. He's impossible to gank. He's really, really good at warding. That's what a lot of people underestimate as well. You can, apply some risky wards, going deep into the enemy jungle, placing those wards, because if you get in trouble, you can almost always get out with that free dash off the W, and then... if an ally's within like a screen length, you can probably W and then get into range to E if they have a brain and give you the jump. So, which doesn't always happen, but often it does. So he's just extremely safe. He gets very good vision control. He does pretty good damage for a tank. His W does up to, I think, 280 damage base, and he has pretty good AP ratios. He is really good at engaging and also getting back out so that you don't get a lot of hits, which means you don't have to stack as many raw sort of tank items, because if you're positioning well, then you shouldn't be taking as many hits in general. And he has very good sustain in the laning phase, especially with that buff to his Q. He gets the healing from his Q. He gets that refillable shield that comes up every 30 seconds or so, depending on how many times you're hitting them, off of his passive. You can take second winds. You're taking, relic shield. So he's pretty sturdy, especially compared to something like Nautilus or Leona. He's going to be a bit more resistant to poke. And he's just so versatile late game. You can hit multiple people with your charm. You have a knock-up, which is not affected by tenacity. Good damage. You can shield and protect people. His shield is still one of the strongest shields in the game, with 140% AP scaling, and I think it's a 280 shield. It might even be a 300 shield. Let me see. I don't know if it says it here. It's a big shield, and people forget it used to be 280. Yeah, I think they buffed it to 300. Like 150 looks wimpy, but you have to remember you can apply that twice. So that's a 300 shield in an era where Janna and Lulu shields are like 170. Karma's shield is like 170. Right? So he has almost double the proper enchanter shields off of this. So, and you can put it on 2 different people if you want. It's incredibly powerful. So, still the same old recon, still really strong. I have been trying out the Radiant Virtue again, and it has about the same win rate as Shirelia's. And I've also tried Even Shroud quite a bit. So, I'm kind of back on the Radiant Virtue train, and my main reasoning here, yes, it is more expensive, but this is the best defensive item that you're going to be able to purchase, so that's going to allow you to be more confident in your engages. It's going to allow you to fight through CC a little bit more, so that maybe they don't one-shot you if you get caught with a stun. So I just think that it provides you a lot of personal protection to take on more risky plays without getting punished, and it has really good team fight 5-on-5 potential with that healing of the 12% max health over time. If you choose to get a Dark Seal, it helps you protect your Dark Seal as well, so you don't lose those stacks, which is a decent little combination with him. And it works really well with Revitalize and Redemption. So Revitalize is going to give you up to 15% increased healing off of this, and then Redemption is just a good team fight item in general. But the 16% extra healing and shielding off of that is also going to apply to Radiant Virtue. So this just kind of doubles down on just a really good team fight potential between Radiant Virtue and Redemption if that's where you want to go. You can also do classic Knight's Vow. Synergizes super well as a second item because it's going to give you the most health of these secondary mainstream items, and that extra health translates over into extra healing off of Radiant, and that 20% damage redirection is very handy because you can afford to take more of that damage without risking your own life when it gets transferred over to you, and that's also going to buy time for more ticks of that Radiant so that you can actually heal somebody through burst a little bit better. So overall, I think it's a really strong item. If you're just kind of setting up for clean 5v5 team fights. Shirelia's is an okay option as well, especially if you think you're going to roam a lot and try to make a lot of plays that way, where you have a lot of bruisers and you're ahead and you just want to run people down with your Olaf or your Hecarim or whatever. It can be pretty good. You're going to be a lot squishier if you run this item, both in terms of you have less health, but also it has no resistances on it, and its scaling is garbage. 5 ability haste is just not a good value, versus this 100 HP is quite a good value. That's 266 gold worth of value for that amount of health per item. 5 ability haste is only going to be 135 value. The other one, that's also a pretty good value at 190 for Even Shroud. Now, Even Shroud is kind of an interesting middle ground. It does have the 30-30 armor and resist that Radiant has. It does have 200 less HP, so that's going to be 500 gold less HP. But it is a lot cheaper. It's only 2,500 gold, so that's useful. And increasing your team's damage against the enemy is pretty good, the 10% damage buff. Now, keep in mind, it's the target and all nearby enemy champions. I'm not sure the range on that. I think it's maybe like 500 or less, but basically your team, if the enemy's grouped up, is gonna do 10% increased damage, and this has no internal cooldown. So when you run around and you're charming multiple people on their team, you're Wing, knocking somebody else up, it's gonna apply that 10% debuff on everybody there. So it does add up. It is quite a bit of extra damage. I was having a pretty good amount of success on that for a while. The big problem is you're just squishier, and it's a little bit harder to find as much value on this as it is with Radiant when you get it. So it is still pretty good. It does have a nice win rate, but it is something that just depends on the tempo, right? If you need an item faster, if you want a snowball, but you also kind of want a defensive item, like if you're just hard winning bottom, but there's a 5-0 Z middle or something, then this could be a decent option. If you need more tankiness than Shirelia's, but you want to get that extra damage on the board to keep snowballing faster, than, buying Radiant, then that's an okay middle ground. Locket, I would only get in extreme circumstances where, they have like a Fed Karthus or, I don't know, like just some relatively unavoidable, like mass AoE burst damage, then Locket can be okay. But I think it's kind of a trap overall. You're really only getting very much value at all if it's like literally a 5-on-5 fight with your Consecrate and your Mythic passive. It just feels kind of wimpy. And then Ionian Boots are good, but really don't underestimate Mercury Treads. Mercury Treads are incredibly powerful on Rakan because he's so mobile that if they don't kill you while you're CC'd, you're probably getting away. So don't be greedy. If they have, anything out there that has a 2-second plus CC, you might need to get Mercury Treads. So you see a Lux, you see a Morgana, you see a Veigar, that's automatic Mercury Treads. And it sucks if that's the only magic damage on their team. It feels really bad if they're all AD plus Morgana, but you just have to do it or you're going to die most of the time. So, especially if they have 2 or 3 magic damage champs on their team and you're getting a lot of value out of the magic resist, that's great, but really getting that 30% tenacity is, a huge difference between life and death. So Ionians are good. That is the greedy option, but Mercury Treads are nice too. I would virtually never get plated Steel Caps because you should not be taking sustained damage from auto attacks. I guess if they are like literally all AD, maybe. And I really wouldn't do Mobies either unless you're just like perma roaming 24/7. So yeah, I'd go with these 2 boots. Ionians, the greedy, like good option, but Mercury Treads is just what you need to do sometimes. I really don't like getting this item second, and you can see that reflected in the stats. It's the worst by far statistically of the top 5 secondary items. People are just doing this because it's on guide still. It's trash. Like, just look at your numbers at the end of games when you get this item, and it's just not going to be reducing that much healing most of the time. Now, it does get reset when you get your Oblivion Orb, and then you complete this item. It starts it over at 0, so you have to keep that in mind. But I just think that a lot of times people just wildly overestimate this day and age just how valuable Grievous Wounds is, because a lot of the healing has been tapped down, and it's only 40% now instead of 30%. Also, you have to deal damage. The shielding doesn't work on it anymore, and they changed the stat profile on it to include like plus healing and shielding. So it's okay. But I would probably just sit on the Oblivion Orb if you feel like you really have to have that against the enemy, and then just build something else like a Knight's Vow. But, okay, enough about Rakan. That's my current thoughts. I think, like I said, Radiant or Shurelya's or even Shroud could all be pretty good on him. But I've been going towards Radiant lately, and I've been liking the extra survivability. And you pretty much always want to run Guardian. I think I said this in my last tier list. I know that there are some Rakan players out there like Feather Daddy that have been advocating for Glacial. I just think you're way too squishy. Like, it's cute, it's interesting to have a slow, but I just think Guardian is just way too powerful. Combined with his shielding and everything else you can bring to the table, it just brings you and your ally a lot of extra survivability. And Revitalize is a very good rune if you're going to go Radiant, and if you're thinking about going for something like Redemption. Revitalize is fantastic. And Demolish as a second one is not that bad. Like, if you get 1 or 2 plates, 2 plates for your team, that's like 320 gold off of Demolish. So I think it's a pretty good rune in a lot of places. And then either second wind or conditioning are still pretty reasonable runes. Okay, Sona, not a lot has changed here. Still really good. They did nerf Rod of the Ages a couple of patches ago. You can still just go either Shurelya's or Moonstone plus Archangels, and I think that's good. She's, almost always going to be my top recommendation for silver and lower. It's very easy to execute on, virtually no skill shots outside of your ultimate. You can just kind of hang back, buff people with your auras. You have basically free harassment in the laning phase. You just walk up, spam Q, get tier on your first back, just keep spamming Q, and you'll keep stacking up your spell thieves to get to your wards really fast. You'll stack up your passive to get those empowerments on your abilities over time. So, it's really good overall champion. She's the queen of 5v5 team fights at 2 or 3 items. She's going to be incredibly strong. The only drawback to Sona is it's really hard for her to make proactive plays. You can use your ultimate to try to make plays with her, but it's just not going to be as good as something like a Rakan or a Blitzcrank or a Nautilus. It's just really hard to be proactive. But if you kind of struggle to make sort of proactive good plays, you find yourself just always going for engages where your team doesn't follow up, or it just doesn't work out for you, and you just want to play something that's a little bit more chill, where you're just going to outscale people by default. You're just telling them to outplay you. Then I think that she's a good pick for you. Okay, Blitzcrank is another one that not a lot has changed here. You know, Blitzcrank is still Blitzcrank from Season 1, you know, basically. A couple of minor adjustments, but it's pretty much you hit your hook and you totally dominate, or you miss your hook and you're totally worthless. The thing that I think is making him pretty strong right now is just that there are a lot of relatively immobile, squishy champs being played in the bot lane. You're not seeing a lot of Alistars, Broms, or Toms, right? You're seeing a lot more things like Sona, things like Thresh. He's actually a really good matchup against Thresh, and that's the most popular support right now. And the reason why he's so good against Thresh is deceptively extremely squishy in the early game. And not a lot of people know that, but his base armor is absurdly low because he gets armor per soul. And so they have just given him deliberately, I don't know if it's saying the number here. Let me look at... it's like 18 or something. Okay, maybe not that low. I guess they did buff it up a little bit, but it's still 28, which is like Sona level armor, right? Sona might be a little bit lower. Okay, not quite Sona, but close, right? So, you know, he's got 28 armor. That's incredibly squishy compared to Blitz, I think, has 44. Thresh, Braum, Alistar, Leona, all of these champs are going to have like 40 plus armor. Okay, Blitz has 40, Alistar, Leona, all those champs have over 40. So that means that you're just going to have... and he has pretty low health. Thresh only has 600 health, and, you know, Blitz and a lot of these other bruisers are going to have, you know, north of 600. So he's very squishy early on. So if you hit a hook on him, there's a really good chance you're going to be able to kill him. And when Thresh is trying to hook somebody, he basically does a little mini stun to himself. He has that half a second wind up because his hook is so strong. It's a 1.5 second piece of CC. Then they gave it the wind up so that people have more opportunity to dodge it. Well, that means you're a sitting duck for a Blitzcrank hook because it is way faster and has a really fat hitbox. And it does more damage, and Thresh is a lot squishier than Blitzcrank. So basically, if they both hook each other, then Blitz is going to annihilate Thresh most of the time. So that's why Blitz is largely considered a pretty hard counter to Thresh. So Thresh is really strong. Sona's really strong. Melio is another one who is very popular right now, who has no movement. I mean, you can use your W to get a slight movement increase, but he doesn't have any dashes. He's super squishy. So there are a lot of good hook targets. Stuff like Jinx is going to be really strong. A lot of people greed out and go Kraken instead of Gale Force on Jinx. So that's really what you're looking for. A lot of squishy targets out there. Tanks are still somewhat popular in the jungle and in top lane, but in solo queue, a lot of people want to play those carries, and they're going to get blown up by Blitzcrank. So if you can land those hooks of Blitz, he is going to be pretty strong right now. Okay, Melio's the next one. He has done a little bit better. Well, to be honest, quite a bit better, right, than I anticipated with my initial sort of review of him. But he has been dialed back from where he was initially. So he does have nice aggression in the early game. That W, the buff that he gives out is incredibly strong with Airy because it reapplies Airy over and over again to people. So that's really handy. You can disrupt people with your ball if they try to jump into you. So particularly that W and its interaction with Airy and the fact that you can double stack the shield does give quite a bit of shielding and good trading in the early game. The R is still not going to be as useful, in my opinion, a lot of the time in many matchups as some of the other supports. And kind of like Sona, he does struggle to engage, to make proactive plays. You can do it in the laning phase if you land some, balls on people, but he's kind of scaling, and I just don't... I mean, I guess he's an early bully, but as an enchanter, you would want him to scale, but I just feel like he doesn't scale nearly as well as stuff like Sona or Yuumi. So he's kind of in a weird spot, but I went ahead and put him in S because his win rate is pretty good. He is very popular, and he can really hard dominate and bully in the early game. So I gave him an honorable S. I could, see an argument for A, but I still think he's pretty good even after the nerfs. Okay, Senna, I went ahead and moved up a little bit. I'm not entirely sure what's bringing her back. I know that they buffed her a little while ago, like 1 or 2 patches ago. Didn't they give her, just a little bit more damage? They give her, the 2 AD buff or something. They did something to buff her up a couple of patches ago, and I was kind of wondering why she wasn't being played when a lot of the other, these weird AD champs were being played, like Ashe AD, Varus AD, whatever. Senna's pretty good, she doesn't have Ash Arrow, but her W is a pretty good piece of CC if you hit it. She has a, global with her R, good harassment early on, good scaling with the souls. Okay, so 13-4. Okay, they gave her extra attack speed scaling. That's pretty big. That doesn't look like a lot. That's 0.1. But just look at it this way. It's 30% more attacks, basically, in terms of her scaling. 30% better scaling. Okay, and the base AD is more on her R, better AD ratio, and the cooldown is reduced by 20 seconds. Okay, that's pretty significant. And then I don't remember her build. I know that some people were doing the health item, the healing item. Umbral has been nerfed, but that's still a popular item that's very good. That gives her really nice vision control. But really just putting her with some of these other bullies early on, especially ones so that she can chain CC together. So things like Caitlyn with Caitlyn's trap, if you hit your W on somebody, just poking them out. Jhin, Jinx, a lot of these champs are going to be pretty good with her. So she can push early, scales pretty well later, has a global presence. So I think that she's just really strong overall. I hate playing against her as Rakan. That is one of the few matchups where I think the -2 armor is going to matter on Rakan, is something like Senna, Jhin against Rakan. So I think she's pretty strong overall. She does struggle to kind of make proactive plays. All she has is her W, but she does scale pretty well in terms of damage, and she does threaten towers later on pretty well also, and obviously is a powerhouse at trading early on, and especially where, champions like Leona seem to be a little bit weaker right now, where you're against maybe some of these other early weak champions that you can bully, like Emilio, Rakan, Sona. She could be good. Obviously, still tough matchup against Blitzcrank. And then Nautilus and Leona can potentially kill her as well. But she's really good against a lot of these other champs. Okay, then Thresh did get some buffs a while ago. I think he got nerfed a little bit last patch. The refund on hitting a Q is 2 seconds now instead of 3 seconds. But overall, still going to be pretty good. Not a lot has changed. Thresh is still Thresh. I think a lot of people are... I don't know if they're still doing Locket on him or not. I know Locket was popular for a while. I still think it should probably be something like Even Shroud, because he has several abilities that trigger that. His Q and his E. Okay, it looks like people do like Shirelia's. He does have some AP scaling that does allow you to run up close and do some stuff. As you can see, Even Shroud is stronger, and actually Radiant has an even higher win rate. And, the Radiant option could be good for the same reason I like it on Rakan. The Mythic passive is one of the most valuable passives out there, and it's just going to give you a lot more HP so that you can feel more confident going in, getting your hands a little dirty, getting a really good R on that back line, and not get blown up. So I might actually try out Radiant on him. I'm not a big fan of the Shirelias. I don't know. I know people like that, the fantasy of like running up and flailing them first and then like predicting where they're going to flash and hooking them and whatever. But honestly, I think that Thresh just kind of works at his best when he's follow-up CC or where he's like throwing hooks from blind spots where he's established vision control and just kind of fishing for hooks. In other words, I really don't like the hyper-aggressive flash flays or run up in their face and flay outside of the laning phase because I think you're just going to put yourself in too vulnerable of a position. So, Shirley's is okay. I just feel like you're going to be too squishy if you do that a lot of the time. And his AP scaling is okay, but not great. It's better on Rakan. And then Locket, as I said before, I feel like it's just a trap. It just doesn't give you enough value. So, it's alright. But, yeah, I would prefer one of these two other items. And then you can do, Mobies if you do want to roam around a lot. Thresh can do that, but ability haste is incredibly powerful on him. So I would tend to favor Ionian Boots in most elo brackets, unless you're just literally sitting on middle all game. Then maybe Mobies, but ability boots are just ridiculously OP because they have ability haste, and that's going to give you more flashes, more ignites, all that kind of stuff. Okay, last few, and then we'll get going because I know I don't want to take too long on this. Nautilus is okay. I don't think they've done a ton to him. I know a few patches ago they did lower the mana cost on his W, and that was a pretty significant. I think they lowered it from like 80 seconds or 80 mana to 60, or maybe 60 to 40. They did lower the mana cost on there, which is significant because that does allow you to reset your auto attack for extra damage on trades, or if your sweeper's just about to time out, you can reset your auto attack to get that last hit on a ward, which can be very good. But it was just like super expensive to do that mana-wise before, so I'm glad they nerfed that. But yeah, Nautilus just always has a relevant kit. He's got a really fat hitbox on his hook. He basically has guaranteed engage off of his R. They can't do anything to get around it unless they hourglass. Like, there are very, very few things that can stop that interaction with R, and it can knock up multiple people in the process. And he has pretty decent sustained damage for a tank in team fights if you max E first, which I think everyone's back on that max E off of Q, or at least I feel like that's the more powerful version. And that also incidentally gives him pretty decent wave clear when you need to push in and get a preferable back or make a rotation or whatever with the E. Now, Rakan, that's something that's undervalued a lot with Rakan as well, is he actually has pretty decent wave clear if you're uncontested. So if you're just trying to push a lane relatively quickly, if you're maxing W first, which you pretty much always do as Rakan, then you can W and, hit a big clump of minions and set it up, almost perfectly for your AC to just really quickly clean it up. So you can't do that in an enemy's face a lot of times because then your W is going to be on cooldown for a long time, but you do have that option. Nautilus, very similar, although it is a much lower cooldown on that E, so sometimes you can do it in their face and still have enough threat where they won't engage on you. So, Nautilus is pretty good. His biggest problem is he's just like really squishy. His W as a defensive steroid is very wimpy compared to like Leona's W. So you can definitely get blown up, but he just has a ton of engage. So, and it's very consistent in terms of the fat hitbox and the R being virtually undodgeable. So, Nautilus is still going to be pretty strong, except I expect to see a decent amount of him at Worlds. Leona just got buffs, like we talked about in the patch notes. She's okay. The biggest problem is that everything that she does is just a piece of normal CC. That's another thing about Nautilus, is that R is a knockup, so it's not reduced by tenacity. The hook is a displacement, where someone's going to be airborne for a good amount of that time, so that's not going to be affected by tenacity. Blitz, him hooking and pulling people out of position is not going to be affected by tenacity. Thresh will be, so that is a consideration. Thresh's hook is reduced significantly by tenacity. But that's the thing with Leona, is all of her stuff is just normal CC that's not a knockup and is going to be affected by tenacity. So, if people get Mercury Treads or they take Cleanse or whatever, it can be a problem. But if you put her in a lane where you have a really scary kill lane and you can just, body the enemy, if you've got a Draven or a Jhin or something like that, and you can just take care of business early on with Leona, especially against some of these other squishy champs, your Sona, your Senna, stuff like that, then she can be very good. But I would say she has the potential to be strong, but she's somewhat situational. So I would not argue if someone wanted to put her in tier 3, but I think she's probably has enough engage and enough snowball potential where if you know what you're doing and you're making good decisions, she can definitely help you climb. And then we've got Renata. I have not seen a ton of her. I know she was showing up some in pro. She's kind of a blend of pretty decent early harassment with her auto attacks and her E. She also has a hook potential with her Q. It's a much shorter hook range than something like Nautilus, Thresh, Blitzcrank, all that kind of stuff. And it has a pretty slender hitbox, but it is a hook. You can make a play with it. And then obviously her R is going to be very good in team fights. Really huge hitbox. Kind of slow moving, but it can make a big impact. And then you can protect one of your hyper carries. So if you have like a Kog'Maw, a Jinx, or whatever, and you put that buff on them, it not only gives them a lot of movement speed and attack speed, but can also resurrect them if they die. So she's just like a better Zillion for support, I think, a lot of times, if you're looking to protect a single target. And then finally, Yuumi. Her win rate is okay. I think it's gone down a little bit. She's still just really obnoxious if you put her on a hyper carry. Specifically, Zeri is really annoying. But I don't think she's as abusive as she used to be in the past. But she is still just very spooky. She's the quintessential just sit back and chill and scale and just win by stats. A lot of people don't like it, but that's what Riot has committed to. That's what they want her to be. They want her to be. You got your friends, Jimmy or Jill or whoever to come play the game, for game night when they don't usually play League, and you just like, all right, just put them on Yuumi, just sit on me, go get some coffee for everybody, and, be back in 10 minutes or whatever, right? So it's just intended to be super easy. You don't have hands. You just play. I know people will talk about, the skill cap, it's so different. And statistically, maybe it is. Maybe she does have, a high learning curve. But in order to, fully unlock her potential. But she's very, very consistent. That's the bottom line for a lot of players. And it's just going to be really powerful if you have a hyper carry. And there's a lot of hyper carries running around. Okay. And then Annie is still okay. Should get several nerfs, which did affect her win rate, I think, pretty significantly. She's still pretty good in that you have your point-click stun later. You can still shield allies. She just doesn't have quite as much scaling as she used to. And obviously, if someone engages on her, they're going to blow her up. She does get... her power gets reduced significantly if the enemy gets mercs, because they get a lot of value out of the CC reduction and her burst damage. So, she's okay. Nami, still pretty good with Lucian, is okay overall. I think, decent with Ezreal, and Ezreal did get a buff on this patch, because obviously her E is going to apply to his Qs as well. So, she's okay. I think it's just a little bit harder to take over the game than some of these other champs. I think if you want an early game bully champ, I'd rather play something like a Senna, if that's your thing, over Nami. But Nami's still okay. There's nothing wrong with her. Lulu, still going to be a pretty good hyper carry, especially if you could put her with Kog'Maw, Twitch, Zeri. I would probably prefer Yuumi after some of the nerfs to Lulu to her W cooldown, and I don't remember. I think they may have nerfed her shield a little bit. So I'd probably rather have Yuumi to fulfill that role, but if Yuumi is banned, which she often is, then you could go with Lulu. So Lulu is very good with hyper carries. You just have to have a lot of faith in your ADC or your Master Yi or whatever your hyper carry is, because it's going to be really hard to make plays. And if your team's just not making good decisions, then you can just feel kind of worthless. Versus if you play something like Rakan, Blitz, Thresh, Nautilus, your team can make a lot of mistakes early, but then if you just find a really good engage, pick off one or two enemies and then go pick up a Baron or something like that, you can completely turn the game around. But it's hard to find those opportunities as an enchanter. So that's why I tend to favor engage champs, with the exception of Sona, just because her consistency early on in her scaling is so high, especially at gold and lower, which I know is a lot of my viewership, that I just like to recommend Sona. because of that. Okay, Pike, still pretty good. Not a lot has changed there. Has a nice hook, good escapes, pretty good roaming. Umbral Glaive is still pretty nice. If you fall behind, he can feel a little worthless. His whole kit is designed to go in and be aggressive. So if you ever have to do anything defensive, that can be pretty rough. But he's decent. Maokai has had some pretty significant hits over time, but still has a lot of CC, still has his R, can still be powerful. Heimer's okay if you want to pressure early on. And that's pretty much it. I do want to keep this relatively short. We'll keep it 45 minutes-ish here. But all the other champs in B and C are playable. They're decent. B, there's nothing wrong with them. I think you can definitely win a lot on them. I know, Rel has a pretty high win rate. I just think a lot of people are inconsistent on her. She's kind of hard to optimize. Your AP champions, your Zyras, your Brands, your Luxes, they can do very well, especially at gold and lower. If you get ahead, if you get some kills, you want to be proactive. You want to make plays in the laning phase, but you just want to kill them yourself instead of setting up your allies to get kills. I think those can still be fine choices. Just the problem is if you fall behind or you're rotating around in the mid game and the jungler catches you out, you're probably dead because you're squishy and you're immobile. At least with some of these tanks, you're going to be tanky, and your allies might be able to come over and help you out before you die if you're playing something like a Leona or a Nautilus or Blitzcrank or whatever. But yeah, that's going to be it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are there any new, flashy, interesting builds out there that you're a fan of? Do you think that I should have put some of these things in some different spots? What are your experiences on the patch so far? And other than that, come by, check out the stream sometime. I'm going to see if I can do maybe an ADC tier list. I know I say that and rarely do it, but I'll see. I should have a little bit of time, maybe Thursday. Tomorrow, I'm going to be super busy grading papers, and I have to finish my taxes tonight. But, yeah, I should be able to maybe do it Thursday or Friday. I should be able to set that up. But anyways, that's it. Thanks. Have a good day. See you next time.